The millionaire made his order in French just to humiliate her. The waitress smiled in silence. What he didn't know was that she spoke 7 languages, and one of them would change his life forever. The restaurant, the Golden Palm, gleamed with the splendor of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like artificial constellations, casting sparkles upon white silk tablecloths and polished silver cutlery. It was the kind of place where the powerful came to celebrate their power, where money spoke louder than words, and where people like Adesua Okoro were invisible. Adesua walked among the tables with her tray perfectly balanced on her right hand. She had been working there for months, always with the same routine. Arrive early, clean, serve, smile, and return home with aching feet and her pride intact, because that was the only thing no one could take from her, her pride. That night, the restaurant was particularly full. Business moguls, politicians, local celebrities, all laughing, toasting, completely ignoring those who served them as if they were ghosts in aprons. Adesua paused for a moment near the kitchen, taking a deep breath. Chef Emeka watched her from his station, noticing something in her expression. "Are you all right, my dear?" he asked with that deep voice that always sounded like an embrace. "Yes, chef. Just a long night. All nights are long when you work for people who believe money makes them better than you." Emeka wiped his hands on his apron. "But remember what I always say, dignity has no price, and you have more dignity in one finger than all of them put together in their wallets." Adesua smiled faintly. Emeka was one of the few who treated her like a person in that place. The others, including some colleagues, saw her as the quiet girl who never complained, who accepted miserable tips and disdainful looks without saying a word. What no one knew was why she stayed silent. What no one imagined was what she hid behind those dark eyes that observed everything with an intensity few noticed. The main door opened with that particular sound, announcing the arrival of someone important. Adesua instinctively turned and saw 2 men enter. The first was older, with neatly combed grey hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Adesua's annual salary. He walked with the natural arrogance of those who have never had to worry about anything in life. The second was younger, perhaps in his late 30s, with the air of an heir who knows the world belongs to him by right of birth. Both were laughing about something, while the restaurant manager practically ran towards them. "Chief Adebayo, what an honor to have you with us tonight. Your favorite table is ready, Chief Obina Adebayo." Adesua had heard that name many times. He owned a chain of luxury restaurants across the region, was a real estate investor, and, according to rumors, a man who enjoyed humiliating those he considered inferior, which by his standards was basically everyone. "Bayola!" The manager approached Adesua with a tense expression. "I need you to attend table 7. It's the Adebayos." "Table 7? But Emeka usually takes that. Emeka is busy, and they just arrived. Go now." Adesua felt a knot forming in her stomach but nodded without protesting. It was her job, and she needed that job more than anyone in that restaurant could imagine. She approached the table where the 2 men were already seated, still laughing at some private joke. When Adesua arrived, neither of them looked at her. It was as if she were part of the furniture. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Golden Palm. My name is Adesua, and I will be your waitress tonight. May I start by offering you something to drink?" Obina finally looked up, but not to meet her eyes. He scanned her from head to toe with that gaze Adesua knew too well, the gaze that evaluated, judged, and dismissed in seconds. "Look, Kunle," he said to the younger man. His son, Adesua, remembered. "How kind of them to send us the prettiest one." Kunle chuckled. "Though she probably can't even read the menu, can she, father?" Both laughed. Adesua maintained her professional smile, though inside she felt as if needles were piercing her chest. She had learned to endure such comments. She had learned that responding only made things worse. "What would you like to drink?" she repeated in a calm voice. Obina picked up the menu and pretended to study it with exaggerated attention. Then he looked at his son with a smile that promised nothing good. "You know, Kunle, I haven't had fun in a while. This girl looks like she barely finished secondary school. I bet she knows nothing beyond 'yes, sir,' and 'thank you for the tip.'" "Father, don't be cruel," Kunle said with false compassion. "Surely she can count. How else would she calculate the tips we never give her?" More laughter. Adesua gripped the pen in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white, but her face remained impassive, and then Obina did something that would change everything. He leaned forward with that predatory smile he used in million-dollar negotiations and began to speak in French. Not just any French formal, technical, deliberately complex French. "Je voudrais commander la bouteille la plus chère de votre vin, mais je doute que cette pauvre fille comprenne ce que je dis. Elle doit probablement penser que je parle chinois." Adesua heard every word clearly, every dismissive nuance. He had said he wanted a bottle of their most expensive wine, but doubted this poor girl would understand what he was saying. She probably thought he was speaking Chinese. Kunle burst out laughing, hitting the table with his palm. "Father, you're terrible. Look at her face. She has no idea what you said." "Of course not." Obinna leaned back in his chair, visibly pleased with himself. "These people barely know English. French, please. You'd need a real education for that, one she clearly never had." Adesua remained motionless. Her heart pounded, but not from shame. It was something different, something she had learned to control over years of practice, because Adesua had understood every word, every insult disguised as a foreign language. But she said nothing. Not yet. "See?" Obinna pointed at her, as if she were a specimen under study. "She doesn't even blink. She's probably thinking about what Yoruba movie she'll watch when she gets to her miserable little house." Adesua took a deep breath. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind like a whisper from the past. True power isn't in showing what you know, but in knowing when to show it. Iya Nkiru, her grandmother, the woman who had taught her everything she knew, the woman who for decades had worked as a translator for embassies, but had never received official recognition because she had no university degrees. The woman who spoke 9 languages fluently and had passed that gift on to Adesua since she was a child. 7 languages. Adesua spoke 7 languages with perfect fluency: French, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, Portuguese, Mandarin, and of course, English. Each learned in her grandmother's kitchen, on long nights listening to recordings, in the worn books her grandmother kept like treasures. But no one knew, because Adesua had learned that in a world that judged by appearances, showing her cards too soon was a fatal mistake. "Well," Obinna switched to English with a bored expression. "Since it's obvious you don't understand anything useful, I'll put it simply. Bring us a bottle of the Chateau Margaux 2005, and make sure it's at the correct temperature, if you people here even know what that means." "Of course, sir. I'll be right back." Adesua retreated with measured steps, her mind processing everything that had just happened. It wasn't the first time she had been humiliated. It wouldn't be the last. But something in the deliberate cruelty of that man, in his need to feel superior by using a language he thought she didn't understand, ignited something within her. In the kitchen, Emeka waited for her with a worried expression. "I saw your face when you came back. What did those men do to you?" "Nothing I haven't heard before." "Adesua, you don't have to put up with this. There are other jobs. There aren't other jobs that pay enough for my grandmother's medicine chef. You know that." Emeka Sahil. He knew Adesua's situation. He knew her grandmother was ill, that medical bills were piling up, that Adesua worked double shifts to survive. What did they say? Adesua hesitated for a moment. The older one spoke in French. "He thought I wouldn't understand. He said terrible things about me." Emeka's eyes widened. "And you?" "I understood every word." A heavy silence fell between them. Emeka knew some things about Adesua that others didn't. He knew she was different, special in a way she never fully explained. "What are you going to do?" Adesua picked up the bottle of wine Obinna had ordered and placed it on the tray. "For now, my job. After that, we'll see." She returned to the table with the bottle, showing it to Obinna as protocol dictated. He barely glanced at it, making a dismissive gesture with his hand for her to serve. As Adesua poured the wine with perfect precision, Obinna spoke again in French to his son. "Regarde ses mains. Elles sont rugueuses et usées. C'est la vie de la classe inférieure. Travailler jusqu'à la mort sans jamais rien accomplir d'important." He was commenting on Adesua's hands, saying they were rough and worn, that this was the life of the lower class, working until death without achieving anything important. Kunle nodded, adding in the same language, "Au moins, elle a un joli visage. C'est probablement la seule chose qu'elle ait dans la vie. At least she has a pretty face. It's probably the only thing she has in life." Adesua finished serving, maintaining her neutral expression, but inside, something was changing. A decision was forming, one she had avoided for years, but which now seemed inevitable. "Would you like to order dinner?" she asked in perfect English. "Bring the best you have," Obinna said. He didn't even look at the menu. "And I hope it's truly the best. I know the owners of this place. One mistake, and you're out of a job." "Understood, sir." Adesua withdrew again, but this time she stopped in a corner of the restaurant where she could observe the table without being seen. The Adebayos continued laughing, speaking in French about business, about people they had ruined, about employees they had fired for fun. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Obinna mentioned the name of a hospital, the same hospital where her grandmother was being treated. He spoke about an investment he was considering, about how he planned to buy part of the hospital and optimize costs, which in his language meant cutting services for patients who couldn't afford luxury treatments. Les personnes âgées et les malades qui ne peuvent pas se permettre une assurance privée sont de toute façon un fardeau pour le système, he said coldly. Quand nous prendrons le contrôle, nous fermerons ces départements non rentables. The old and sick who cannot afford private insurance are a burden on the system anyway. When we take control, we will close those unprofitable departments. Adesua felt the world stop. Her grandmother depended on that hospital, on those unprofitable departments that this man wanted to close, on doctors and nurses who treated patients regardless of how much money they had. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. A silent fury she had kept contained. Her whole life began to overflow, but she wouldn't act impulsively. That wasn't what her grandmother had taught her. The right moment, she whispered to herself. Everything has its right moment. She returned to the kitchen, where Biola, the manager, awaited her with a serious expression. Adesua, Chief Adebayo and his son, have asked to speak with you specifically. I don't know what you've done, but you better not have ruined anything. Adesua's heart raced. Had they discovered her? Had they noticed something in her expression that betrayed her understanding? She walked towards the table with firm steps, preparing for whatever came. Obina awaited her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sit, he ordered, pointing to an empty chair. Sir, employees cannot. I said, sit. Adesua obeyed slowly, feeling the stares of the entire restaurant on her. This was unusual, completely out of protocol. Obina leaned forward, studying her as if she were an insect under a microscope. My son and I have been observing you all night. There's something different about you, something I can't identify. And that bothers me because I always identify people. Adesua didn't respond, just looked him directly in the eyes, something that clearly made him uncomfortable. I'm going to make you an offer, Obina continued. I need staff for my restaurants. People who know how to serve, who are discreet, who don't cause problems. I'd pay triple what you earn here. It was a trap. Adesua knew it. Men like Obina didn't make generous offers without expecting something in return. That's very kind, sir, but I'm fine where I am. Obina's smile froze. No one said no to him. Excuse me? I said I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to stay here. Kunle let out an incredulous laugh. Did you hear that, father? The waitress is rejecting your offer. Obina narrowed his eyes. I don't think you understand your position, girl. I'm not asking. I'm telling you what you're going to do, and I am telling you, with all due respect, that my answer is no. The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Nearby diners had stopped talking, observing the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. Obina slowly rose to his feet, his imposing height casting a shadow over Adesua. You will regret this. His voice was low, dangerous. No one says no to me, especially someone like you. Adesua also stood up, surprising herself with her own audacity. Someone like me, she repeated. And what exactly am I, Chief Adebayo? A nobody, he sneered, a waitress who doesn't know her place in the world. Adesua smiled for the first time all night. She smiled, genuinely. You're right about one thing, sir. I am a waitress, but you're wrong about everything else. She turned to leave, but Obina's voice stopped her. Vous regretterez d'être venu au travail ce soir. Je ferai en sorte que vous ne travaillez plus jamais dans cette ville. You will regret having come to work tonight. I will make sure you never work in this city again. Adesua paused, her back to him, her heart pounding. The moment had arrived. She turned slowly, looking him directly in the eyes. And then, in perfect French with an impeccable accent, she replied, Je comprends chaque mot que vous avez dit ce soir, Monsieur Adebayo, chaque insulte, chaque plan, et je vous promets, le seul qui le regrettera, ce sera vous. I understand every word you have said tonight, Chief Adebayo, every insult, every plan, and I promise you, the only one who will regret anything will be you. The expression on Obina's face was something Adesua would never forget. Color drained from his face. His eyes widened with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Kunle dropped his wineglass, the red liquid spilling onto the white tablecloth like blood on snow. Adesua turned and walked towards the kitchen, leaving behind the stunned silence of the city's most exclusive restaurant. She didn't know what would happen next, what consequences her actions would have. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. What she didn't know was that this night was only the beginning, that Chief Obina Adebayo was not the kind of man who accepted being humiliated, and that the war that had just begun would reveal secrets that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone involved. Because in that restaurant, under the crystal chandeliers, a spark had been ignited that would soon become an inferno, and Adesua Okoro was ready to burn. The kitchen doors closed behind Adesua with a dull thud that resonated like the end of one chapter and the beginning of a much darker one. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her temples, in her wrists, in every part of her body that trembled with a mixture of adrenaline and terror. What had she done? Emeka was the first to reach her side, taking her by the shoulders with firm hands. "Adesua, what happened out there? The whole restaurant is silent. I've never seen anything like it," I replied to him. Adesua's voice was barely a whisper. In French, I told him I understood everything. Emeka's eyes widened. "You replied to Chief Obina Adebayo to his face. In French?" Before Adesua could respond, the kitchen doors burst open violently. Manager Biola entered, her face contorted with fury and panic. "Adesua, what the hell did you do? Chief Adebayo is furious. He's demanding to speak with the owners right now." "Biola, he was humiliating me. He thought I didn't understand, and I don't care what he thought." Biola interrupted her sharply. "Do you have any idea who that man is? Do you have the slightest idea what he can do to us?" Adesua felt the kitchen walls closing in on her. The other employees looked at her with expressions ranging from compassion to resentment. Some seemed impressed by what she had done, but most were simply scared. Biola, Emeka intervened. "Whatever happened, Adesua is one of our best employees. We can't." "Silence! Emeka, this is none of your business." Biola turned to Adesua with eyes that radiated coldness. "You're suspended, without pay, until the owners decide what to do with you. Now, get out through the back door. I don't want Chief Adebayo to see you leave." Adesua felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Suspended, without pay. The words echoed in her mind as she thought of her grandmother's medicine, the pending bills, the rent due in a few days. "Biola, please, I need this job. My grandmother is ill and you should have thought about that before you decided to play the hero." Biola pointed towards the back door. "Out, now." Adesua looked into Emeka's eyes, hoping to find some support, but he could only lower his gaze helplessly. There was nothing he could do, not against the manager, not against the weight of the Adebayo name. With trembling hands, Adesua took off her apron and placed it on the stainless steel table. She walked towards the back door, feeling each step as if she were walking towards a precipice. Outside, the alley was dark and smelled of garbage and dampness. Adesua leaned against the brick wall, letting the tears she had held back finally stream down her cheeks. What was she going to do now? Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You made a very grave mistake tonight, and mistakes have to be paid for. Sincerely, someone who will be watching you." A shiver ran down her spine. Obina, Kunle, someone who worked for them. The message was clearly a threat, but what could they do to her that they hadn't already? The answer would come sooner than she imagined. Adesua walked through the empty streets towards the bus stop. At that hour, public transport was scarce, and she had to wait almost 40 minutes in the dark, constantly looking over her shoulder, feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows. When she finally arrived at her small apartment on the outskirts of the city, she found her grandmother Nkiru awake, sitting in her favorite chair by the window, looking at the distant city lights. "You're home early, my child." Nkiru's voice was weak but warm, as always. Did something happen? Adesua knelt beside her grandmother, taking her wrinkled hands in hers. How to tell her the truth? How to explain that she had lost the job that allowed them to survive? "Grandma, I did something tonight. Something I perhaps shouldn't have done." Nkiru's eyes, though tired from illness, shone with that sharp intelligence that age had not managed to extinguish. "Tell me everything, Adesua. Don't leave anything out." And Adesua did. She told her about the Adebayos, about the humiliations in French, about the plans to buy the hospital, about her response, and the consequences that followed. When she finished, she expected to see disappointment on her grandmother's face. Instead, she saw pride. "You did well, my child." Nkiru squeezed Adesua's hands with surprising strength. "You did exactly what you had to do." "But Grandma, I lost the job. I don't know how we're going to." "Listen to me." Nkiru interrupted her firmly. "I spent my whole life being silent, my whole life being invisible, so that people like that Adebayo could feel superior. I translated for ambassadors, for presidents, for people who governed entire countries, and none of them knew my name. None thanked me. None saw beyond the woman who served coffee and translated their words." Tears now ran down both their cheeks. "I don't want that for you, Adesua. I don't want you to live your life in silence. You have a gift that I gave you with all my love, and that gift is not to be hidden, It is to be used to defend yourself, to defend others who cannot defend themselves. Adesua hugged her grandmother, feeling the fragile body under her arms, the bones that protruded where there had once been firm flesh, the heart that beat weakly, but with unwavering determination. I'm scared, Grandma. That man has power. He can destroy us. Power without honor is just noise, my child, and noise, no matter how loud, eventually fades away. That night, Adesua could barely sleep. Her mind went over and over the events at the restaurant, Obina's words, the threat of the text message, the uncertainty of the future. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the millionaire's face transforming from mockery to fury when she spoke in French. The next day, the reality of her situation became even clearer. When she tried to call the restaurant to speak with Biola, no one answered. When she went in person, the security guard prevented her entry, saying she was no longer welcome. I'm sorry, madam. The guard, an older man who had always treated her well, seemed genuinely apologetic. Orders from above. I can't let you in. But my things, my last pay. They told me they would be sent to you by mail along with your termination letter. Termination letter? Not just suspended, fired. Adesua walked through the city in a daze. What was she going to do now? She had savings for perhaps 2 weeks. After that, she didn't want to think about after. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but different from the threat of last night. Adesua Okoro, a male voice, professional, cold. Yes, this is she. This is Barrister Ajayi, lawyer for Adebayo Group. My client wishes to meet with you this afternoon. It's an urgent matter. Adesua's heart stopped for a second. Meet with me? For what? That will be discussed in person. You have 1 hour to present yourself at the corporate offices of Adebayo Group. The address will be sent to you by message. I strongly suggest you do not miss it. The call cut off before Adesua could respond. Minutes later, she received the address, an office building in the financial district, the kind of place where people like her normally only entered to clean floors. Part of her wanted to ignore the summons, but another part, the part her grandmother had raised to never run from problems, knew she had to go. She had to know what they wanted. She had to face what was coming. She changed into the best clothes she had, a simple white blouse, a dark skirt, shoes she had bought in a second-hand store but still looked presentable. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and took a deep breath. I can do this, she whispered. I can do this. The Adebayo Group building was a tower of glass and steel that rose into the sky like a monument to the power of money. Adesua entered through the revolving doors and found herself in a lobby that was larger than her entire apartment. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed woman with an expression of professional boredom, looked her up and down with that scrutiny Adesua knew too well. May I help you? I have an appointment. My name is Adesua Okoro. Something changed in the receptionist's expression. Recognition, curiosity, pity. Of course, they are expecting you. 27th floor. The elevators are to your right. The elevator ascended in silence, the numbers changing on the digital display like a countdown to something inevitable. When the doors opened on the 27th floor, Adesua found herself in front of another receptionist. This one even more intimidating than the last. Miss Okoro, this way, please. She was guided down a corridor with walls covered in art that probably cost more than Adesua would earn in her entire life. At the end of the corridor was a double door of dark wood. The receptionist knocked softly, and a voice from inside said, "Come in." Obina Adebayo's office was exactly what Adesua expected. Enormous, ostentatious, designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city spread below like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. And there he was, sitting behind a mahogany desk that looked like an altar to his own ego. Beside him, Kunle, with that same scornful smile from the previous night, and in a corner, a man in a grey suit, who must be the lawyer who had called her. Miss Okoro. Obina did not get up, nor did he even make a gesture to greet her. How kind of you to accept our invitation. It didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like an order. Kunle chuckled, but his father raised a hand to silence him. Direct. I like that. Although sincerity can be dangerous when one lacks the power to back it up. Obina leaned back in his chair. But I didn't call you to exchange pleasantries. I called you because we have a problem. And problems, in my experience, have two solutions. They are eliminated or they are controlled. Adesua felt a chill, but maintained her neutral expression. And I am a problem for you. You have been since last night. You see, I don't care that you understand French. In fact, it's impressive. But what I do care about is that you heard things you shouldn't have heard. Adesua's heart raced. The plans for the hospital, the business conversations. What else might Obina have said, thinking no one understood? I don't know what you're referring to. Of course, you do. Obina leaned forward. You heard about my plans for Harmony General Hospital. Plans that are confidential. Plans that could be affected if someone with the wrong contacts found out ahead of time. I don't have contacts of any kind. I'm just a waitress. You were a waitress. Kunle intervened maliciously. Now you're nothing. Kunle, silence. Obina did not take his eyes off Adesua. Here is my offer, Miss Okoro. Unique and non-negotiable. You will sign a confidentiality agreement. You will not speak to anyone about what you heard last night. In return, you will receive generous compensation, enough to pay for your grandmother's treatment for a year, and a letter of recommendation that will open doors for you in any restaurant in the city. Adesua blinked. How did he know about her grandmother? How did he know about the treatment? I see it surprises you that I know about your grandmother, Ian Kiru. Obina smiled without warmth. I did my research this morning. I know where you live. I know where she receives treatment. I know how much you owe in medical bills. Knowledge is power, Miss Okoro, and I have plenty of both. The lawyer approached with a folder, placing it on the desk in front of Adesua. Inside was a multi-page document and a check. Adesua looked at the check. The amount was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Enough to pay for everything. Enough to breathe easy for the first time in years. But something wasn't right. Something in Obina's expression. Something in the way Kunle looked at her with anticipation, as if they expected her to fall into a trap. And if I don't sign, the silence that followed was heavy, laden with unstated threats. If you don't sign, Obina spoke slowly, savoring each word, I will make your life impossible. You already lost your job at the Golden Palm. I can ensure you don't work in any restaurant in this city, in this country, if I put my mind to it. And your grandmother's treatment at Street Michael's, well, let's just say that when I complete my acquisition of the hospital, certain patients might find their beds are no longer available. Adesua felt nauseous. It wasn't an offer. It was blackmail, extortion disguised as generosity. You're threatening me. I'm giving you options. There's a difference. Adesua's hands trembled as she looked at the document. The words swam before her eyes. Legal clauses, complicated terms, all designed to silence her permanently. She thought of her grandmother, of her smile when she said she was proud, of her words about not living life in silence. She thought of the voices she had heard Obina mention, the people who would be affected if he bought the hospital, the patients who would lose their care, the families who would suffer. She thought of everything she had learned throughout her life, every language, every word, every lesson about dignity and courage, and she made a decision. No, she said in a firm voice. Obina frowned. Excuse me, I said no. I will not sign this. Kunle stood up. Are you mad? Do you have any idea what you're rejecting? I have a perfect idea. Adesua also stood up, looking directly into Obina's eyes. I am refusing to be bought. I am refusing to be silenced. And I am refusing to be part of whatever you plan to do with that hospital. You will regret this. Obina's voice was pure ice. I will destroy you and everything you care about. Adesua walked towards the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. Monsieur Adebayo, she said in perfect French, vous avez opprimé des gens comme moi toute votre vie. Mais cette fois-ci, vous vous êtes attaqué à la mauvaise personne. Je ne me tairai pas, et si je tombe, je ne tomberai pas seul. Chief Adebayo, all your life you have oppressed people like me. But this time you picked on the wrong person. I will not be silenced, and if I fall, I will not fall alone. She left the office without looking back, her heart pounding, her legs barely holding her. She didn't know how she was going to keep that promise. She didn't know what resources she had against a man with the power of Obina Adebayo. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The war had officially begun, and Adesua Okoro had no intention of losing it. What she didn't know was that very afternoon, as she returned home to embrace her grandmother and plan her next move, Obina Adebayo was making a call that would change everything. I need you to thoroughly investigate that girl, he said into the phone with an icy voice. I want to know every secret, every weakness, every person she cares about, and when you have everything, we will destroy her completely. On his computer screen shone a photo of Adesua, taken by the building's security cameras, and next to it, a photo of Ian Kiru entering Harmony General Hospital for her weekly treatment. The battle for dignity was about to become a fight for survival. The walk back home was the longest Adesua had ever taken in her life. Each step weighed like lead. Each breath was a conscious effort not to collapse in the middle of the street. She had defied a giant, and now that giant was preparing to crush her. When she opened the door to her small apartment, she found something she didn't expect. Her grandmother Kiru was not in her chair by the window. She was standing, leaning on her cane, with an old suitcase open on the bed. "Grandma, what are you doing? You shouldn't be up for so long. I'm looking for something, my child." Kiru spoke with a determination Adesua hadn't heard in months. "Something I should have shown you a long time ago." Adesua approached, worried about the effort her grandmother was making. The illness had weakened her body, but it had clearly not touched her spirit. "Grandma, please, sit down. Whatever it is, I can look for it." "No, this I have to find myself." Kiru's wrinkled hands rummaged through the contents of the suitcase. Yellowed papers, old photographs, letters in envelopes worn by time. Finally, her fingers closed around a worn but carefully preserved brown leather folder. "Here it is." Kiru sank onto the bed, breathing with difficulty. "Sit down, Adesua. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about our family." Adesua obeyed, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and fear. What secrets could her grandmother be hiding? What did it have to do with what was happening now? "Many years ago, before you were born, I worked as a translator for diplomatic families." Kiru began, her voice transporting her to decades past. "I had no degrees, but I spoke 9 languages. I learned them the same way I taught you, by listening, practicing, living among people from all over the world." "I know that already, Grandma. What you don't know is who I worked for during the last years of my career as a translator." Kiru opened the folder and took out a black and white photograph. In it appeared a much younger version of herself, elegantly dressed, next to a man in a suit Adesua didn't recognize. This man was Chief Adebayo Sr., Obina's father. Adesua felt as if the ground opened beneath her feet. "You worked for the Adebayos?" "For 5 years. I was his personal translator in all international negotiations. Chief Adebayo Sr. built his empire with my help, translating contracts, closing deals, facilitating communications with partners around the world." Tears began to form in Kiru's eyes as she continued. Adebayo Sr. was different from his son. He was ambitious, yes, but he had honor. He treated me with respect. He even promised me that when he retired, he would give me a share of the profits from the businesses I had helped build. I had signed documents, legal agreements, and what happened? Chief Adebayo Sr. died suddenly. "A heart attack," they said. And when I went to claim what was mine, I met Obina. He was barely 25 then, but he was already the cruel man you know now. Kiru pulled another document from the folder. It was a contract with official signatures and seals. "This is the original agreement. Adebayo Sr. promised me 5% of Adebayo Group's profits as compensation for my years of service. But when I showed it to Obina, he laughed in my face." Kiru's voice broke with the memory. "He told me that a house staff had no right to anything, that if I tried to claim legally, he would use all his power to destroy me. And he did. He hired lawyers who invalidated the contract, claiming I didn't have the legal capacity to sign agreements of that nature. They took everything from me, my reputation, my savings, my dignity." Adesua took her grandmother's hands, feeling the injustice of decades concentrate in that moment. "Why did you never tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of having been so naive, ashamed of not having been able to defend myself. And fear, Adesua. Fear that if you ever crossed paths with the Adebayos, they would discover who you were and harm you. But now they already know who I am." "Exactly." Kiru squeezed Adesua's hands tightly. "That's why you need to know the complete truth. Because there's something else in this folder. Something Obina doesn't know I have." She pulled out a thick envelope sealed with old wax. "During my years working for Adebayo Sr., I translated many documents. Some of them were delicate, businesses that weren't exactly legal, agreements with people who preferred to remain in the shadows." "What kind of businesses?" "The kind that would destroy the Adebayo Group's reputation if it came to light. Adebayo Sr. made me swear I would never reveal what I knew, and I kept my promise while he lived. But Obina broke all the promises his father made me, so I no longer have any obligation to keep their secrets." Adesua looked at the envelope as if it contained a bomb. In a sense, it was. "Grandma, are you sure about this? If Obina discovers you have this, I no longer care what happens to me, Adesua. I am old, I am sick, but you have a whole life ahead of you, and I will not allow that man to take it from you, as he took mine from me." Adesua's phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Adesua Okoro. A feminine voice, professional, but warm. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Femi Adeyemi." I'm a journalist for the National Standard newspaper. I heard about what happened at the Golden Palm last night. I'd like to speak with you." Adesua's heart raced. How had a journalist found out so quickly? "How did you get my number?" "I have my sources, but that's not what's important. What's important is that I have information about Chief Obinna Adebayo that I think will interest you. And I think you have information that interests me. Can we meet?" Adesua looked at her grandmother, who had heard the entire conversation. Nkiru nodded slowly. "Where and when?" "Tomorrow, at the Hope Cafe near the Central Plaza, at 10 a.m. And Miss Okoro, please come alone, and don't tell anyone about this call." The communication cut off. Adesua stared at the phone, processing what had just happened. "Who was that?" Nkiru asked. "A journalist. She says she has information about the Adebayos. It could be a trap, I know, but it could also be our only chance." That night, Adesua couldn't sleep. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, fears, and possibilities. She read the documents her grandmother had given her, each page revealing a story of corruption, manipulation, and cruelty that spanned decades. But there was something else among the papers, something her grandmother hadn't mentioned directly. A letter written in French, addressed to Chief Adebayo Sr. from a European business partner. The letter spoke of a secret agreement, of money transferred to offshore accounts, of political favors bought and sold. Adesua translated every word, feeling the puzzle begin to take shape. The Adebayos hadn't built their empire solely with hard work and business acumen. They had built it on lies, bribes, and the exploitation of people like her grandmother. The next morning, Adesua prepared for the meeting with the journalist. Before leaving, her grandmother stopped her. "Take this with you." She handed her a small silver medallion. "It belonged to your mother. She also had your courage. Yeide died young, but she lived without fear. I want you to remember that today." Adesua hugged her grandmother tightly, feeling the fragility of her body, but also the strength of her spirit. "I'll be back soon, Grandma. I promise." "I know you will, my child, but if something goes wrong, I want you to know that I am proud of you. I always was. From the day you were born, the Hope Cafe was a modest place on a quiet corner of the city. Small tables, walls decorated with old photographs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee floating in the air. Adesua arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time and chose a table in the corner from where she could see the entrance door. Femi Adeyemi arrived promptly. She was a woman in her 40s, with dark hair tied back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed to analyze everything around her. She dressed simply but professionally and carried a leather briefcase worn from use. "Miss Okoro," she sat opposite Adesua without preamble. "Thank you for coming. Before we discuss anything, I need to know how you found out what happened." Femi smiled slightly. "I have a source inside the Golden Palm, someone who witnessed everything that happened that night and who is very tired of seeing how the Adebayos treat people." "Who?" "That I cannot reveal. Source protection. But what I can tell you is that this is not the first time Chief Obinna Adebayo has humiliated employees in that manner, and it's not the first time he's destroyed the life of someone who dared to challenge him." Femi opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've been investigating Adebayo Group for 3 years. I have testimonies from unfairly dismissed former employees, from competitors ruined by illegal tactics, from public officials bribed to favor their businesses. But I've never been able to publish anything because every time I get too close, someone threatens me or my sources disappear." "Disappear?" "Not literally, but suddenly they change their minds, move out of town, decide they don't want to talk anymore. The Adebayo's power reaches far, Miss Okoro, farther than you imagine." Adesua thought of the documents her grandmother had given her, the letters, the contracts, the decades of secrets. "Why are you looking for me?" "Because you did something no one else has done. You confronted him publicly. And not only that, you confronted him in his own language. Literally. That makes you a symbol. And symbols are powerful. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to protect my family." "I understand that, but sometimes the best way to protect our family is by exposing those who threaten us." Femi leaned forward. "Miss Okoro, I am preparing a report that could destroy the Adebayos, but I need more evidence. Solid evidence that they cannot deny or buy. Do you have anything like that?" Adesua hesitated. Trusting a stranger was risky, but going it alone against the Adebayos was suicide. "I have documents," she finally said. "Documents my grandmother kept for decades. Contracts, letters, agreements that prove illegal activities." Femi's eyes gleamed with interest. "What kind of activities?" "Bribes, tax evasion, agreements with people who operated outside the law." Everything translated and documented by my grandmother when she worked for Chief Adebayo Sr. Your grandmother worked for the Adebayos for 5 years, and when Adebayo Sr. died, Obina stripped her of everything that was legally hers. Femi leaned back in her chair, processing the information. This is bigger than I thought. Much bigger. There's something else. Adesua took a deep breath. Obina is planning to buy Harmony General Hospital. He wants to close the departments that serve patients without resources. My grandmother receives treatment there. Do you have proof of that? I heard it directly from his mouth in French. He thought no one understood. Femi took a recorder from her briefcase. Would you be willing to give a recorded testimony? To tell everything you know, including about your grandmother? Adesua thought of Nkiru, of her tired but proud smile, of the decades of silence she had endured, of the opportunity to finally do justice. Yes, I am willing. For the next 2 hours, Adesua spoke, telling everything. The night at the restaurant, the humiliations in French, the meeting at Adebayo Group's offices, the blackmail, the threats, and then she told her grandmother's story. Every word was like lifting a weight from her soul. When she finished, Femi put away the recorder with a serious but hopeful expression. This is enough to start, but I need to see those original documents. Can you get them for me? I'll have to talk to my grandmother. They are hers, not mine. I understand, but do it soon. The Adebayos won't stand still. If they discover we're working together, they'll try to stop us. Adesua nodded, getting up to leave, but before she could take a step, Femi stopped her. One more thing, Miss Okoro. Last night I received an anonymous call. Someone warned me to be careful with you, that you were dangerous, unstable, that nothing you said could be trusted. Adesua's stomach churned. Who called? They didn't leave a name, but I recognized the number. It was from Kunle Adebayo's personal cell phone, so it was him. Kunle had been the one who sent the threatening message the night of the restaurant. Kunle was trying to discredit her before she could defend herself. And why did you decide to meet with me anyway? Femi smiled. Because in my experience, when someone like Kunle Adebayo tries to destroy a person's reputation before meeting them, it means that person has something they fear. And I want to know what it is. Adesua left the cafe with a mixture of hope and terror. She had an ally, she had a plan, but she also had powerful enemies who were willing to do anything to silence her. As she walked towards the bus stop, her phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Emeka, the chef. Adesua, I need to see you urgently. I found out something about the Adebayos that you must know. It's about your grandmother. Please, come to the restaurant after 11 p.m. when it's closed. Enter through the back door. It's important. Adesua read the message 3 times. What could Emeka know about her grandmother? Why such urgency and secrecy? Something wasn't right. But at the same time, Emeka had always been kind to her, always protected her. She could trust him. Couldn't she trust anyone? What Adesua didn't know was that at that very moment in the Adebayo Group offices, Obina Adebayo was receiving the investigation report he had ordered. And what that report contained not only revealed who Adesua Okoro really was, it revealed a secret that connected the 2 families in a way no one would have imagined. A secret that, if it came to light, would destroy much more than reputations. It would destroy lives. The clock struck 10:40 p.m. when Adesua got off the bus 2 blocks from the Golden Palm. The streets were almost empty, dimly lit by streetlights that cast long shadows on the damp pavement. It had rained during the afternoon, and the air still smelled of wet earth and asphalt. Every step she took towards the restaurant increased the uneasiness in her chest. Emeka's message kept replaying in her head. What could he know about her grandmother? Why so much mystery? Why meet in secret after closing? Before leaving home, Adesua had hesitated. Nkiru noticed her unease. Where are you going at this hour, my child? Emeka asked me to meet. He says he has important information. The chef? Nkiru frowned. And why can't he tell you over the phone? I don't know, Grandma, but Emeka was always good to me. I trust him. Nkiru had looked at her with those eyes that seemed to see beyond words. Be careful, Adesua. In times of war, even friends can unknowingly become enemies. Adesua had promised to be cautious, but now, standing in front of the alley leading to the back door of the restaurant, her grandmother's words resonated like a warning she perhaps should have heeded more carefully. The alley was dark. The only light came from a lamp above the back door that flickered intermittently as if it were about to go out. Adesua walked slowly, her senses alert, her heart beating faster and faster. The door was ajar. Emeka, she called softly, pushing the door open carefully. The kitchen was in semi-darkness. The stainless steel surfaces gleamed faintly under the emergency light that was always left on. Everything was silent. Too silent. "Emeka, are you here?" A noise to her right made her turn abruptly. A figure emerged from the shadows, but it wasn't Emeka. It was Kunle Adebayo. Adesuwa's heart stopped for a second before beginning to pound uncontrollably. She instinctively recoiled, but another figure appeared behind her, blocking the exit. "Obina Adebayo. Good evening, Miss Okoro." Obina's voice was soft, almost kind, which made it even more terrifying. "How kind of you to accept our invitation. Where is Emeka?" Adesuwa managed to ask, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. "The chef?" Kunle let out a scornful laugh. "He's at home, sleeping peacefully. He has no idea we used his name to bring you here. The message had been a trap from the beginning." Adesuwa felt nauseous as she realized how easily she had fallen. "What do you want from me?" Obina walked slowly towards her, his shoes echoing on the kitchen floor with each step. "What I want, Miss Okoro, is to understand something that has been bothering me since I received a certain report this afternoon." He pulled an envelope from his inner pocket. "You see, when I ordered an investigation into you, I expected to find the typical debts, family problems, perhaps some embarrassing secret I could use to pressure you. But what I found was much more interesting." He opened the envelope and took out several documents. "Did you know that your mother, Yejide Okoro, worked briefly for my father many years ago? Before you were born?" Adesuwa felt as if the ground moved beneath her feet. Her mother, she had never known much about her. Iya and Kiru rarely spoke of Yejide, and when she did, it was with such deep sadness that Adesuwa had learned not to ask. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course not, because your grandmother made sure to erase that part of history." Obina smiled coldly. "Your mother was beautiful, according to records, intelligent too. My father hired her as a personal assistant when she was barely 19. Ian Kiru already worked for us then, translating documents. I suppose it was she who recommended her daughter. Where are you going with this?" "To the truth, Miss Okoro. To the truth your grandmother has hidden from you your entire life." Kunle approached from behind, too close for Adesuwa's comfort. She could feel his breath on her neck, his menacing presence. "My father was a man of diverse appetites." Obina continued, "And your mother was young, vulnerable, alone in the world, except for her mother, Ian Kiru. It's not hard to imagine what happened." "You're lying." Adesuwa's voice came out louder than she expected. "My mother died when I was a baby in an accident. That's what Ian Kiru told you." Obina shook his head with false compassion. "How convenient. The truth is much more complicated. Your mother did not die in an accident, Miss Okoro. Your mother disappeared. She left one night without a trace, leaving you with Ian Kiru. And the reason she left, well, that has to do directly with my family." Adesuwa felt the world spinning around her. Her mother had not died. Ian Kiru had lied to her all her life. "I don't believe you," she said, though her voice no longer sounded so sure. "You don't have to believe me. You can ask your grandmother directly, but before you do, allow me to show you something else." He pulled a photograph from the envelope. It was old, yellowed by time. In it appeared a young woman, beautiful, with eyes Adesuwa recognized immediately because she saw them every day in the mirror. Her mother, but she was not alone in the photo. Beside her, with his arm around her shoulders, was a man Adesuwa also recognized. Chief Adebayo Sr., Obina's father. "Your mother and my father had a relationship, Miss Okoro. A relationship that lasted almost 2 years. And when it ended, well, let's just say the consequences were permanent." The meaning of his words took a moment to penetrate Adesuwa's mind. When it did, she felt as if her heart had been torn from her chest. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "Not possible," Obina laughed softly. "Genetics don't lie. Did you never wonder where your knack for languages came from? Iya Nkiru speaks 9. It's true. But my father spoke 12. He was a linguistic genius. A gift he clearly passed on to you." "You're lying," Adesuwa screamed, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "This is all a lie to manipulate me." "A lie?" Obina pulled out another document. "This is a DNA analysis my father ordered more than 20 years ago. He compared his blood with your mother's when she became pregnant. He wanted to be sure before making certain decisions. He showed the paper to Adesuwa. Numbers, percentages, scientific terms. She could barely process in her state of shock. According to this analysis, there is a 99.9% probability that Chief Adebayo Sr. was your biological father, Miss Okoro, which means you and I are siblings." The silence that followed was absolute. Adesuwa couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. The world, as she knew it, had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Of course, Obina continued in a casual tone, my father never officially recognized you. When he discovered the pregnancy, he offered your mother money to disappear. Yejid refused the money, but she disappeared anyway shortly after you were born. No one knows exactly what happened to her. Some say she fled, others have darker theories. What did you do to her? Adesua finally found her voice, hoarse with tears. What did you do to my mother? I didn't do anything to her. I was a child then, but my father was a man who protected his legacy at any cost. An illegitimate child, especially a daughter, would have been a scandal, a stain on his perfect reputation. Kunle spoke for the first time since he had revealed his presence. The irony is that all these years, my grandfather's illegitimate daughter has been serving tables in restaurants, cleaning houses, surviving on crumbs, while we inherited everything that technically also belongs to you. Shut up, Kunle. Obina shot him a warning glance. We're not here to discuss inheritances. Then what are we here for? Adesua asked, wiping away her tears furiously. To torture me with secrets from the past? To watch me break down? We're here to offer you a deal. Obina put the documents back in the envelope. Now that you know the truth, you have two options. The first, you keep silent about everything. About what you heard in the restaurant, about the hospital plans, about these documents. In return, I will ensure your grandmother receives the best possible medical treatment at no cost, and you will receive a monthly sum that will allow you to live comfortably. And the second option? The second option is that you continue with your little crusade for justice, that you talk to journalists, that you try to expose me. But if you choose that path, I will not only destroy your life and your grandmother's, I will also make sure the world knows you are an illegitimate Adebayo, only seeking money. I will turn your story of struggle into a story of greed, and believe me, I have the resources to do it. Adesua stared at him. This man was her brother. They shared blood, they shared a father, but they shared nothing else. He was everything she despised, everything her grandmother had taught her to reject. Why? She asked softly. Why so much hatred? If what you say is true, we are family. For the first time, something changed in Obina's expression. A shadow crossed his face, something that might have been pain or resentment. Family? My father spent his last years obsessed with you, not with his legitimate children, not with the empire he built, but with the daughter he had abandoned. Before he died, he confessed to me that the biggest mistake of his life was not having recognized you, that you were his true heir, not I. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. So don't talk to me about family, Miss Okoro. You stole my father's love without even knowing it, and now you want to steal everything else from me. I don't want anything from you, Adesua said firmly. I just want justice for my grandmother, for my mother, for all the people your family has destroyed. Then you chose the second option, Obina signaled, and two men appeared from the shadow's bodyguards by their appearance. Large, intimidating, with blank expressions of professionals accustomed to unpleasant jobs. Escort Miss Okoro home. Make sure she understands the consequences of her decisions. Adesua felt panics grow in her chest. What were they going to do to her? What were they going to do to her grandmother? But before the bodyguards could touch her, a voice resonated from the kitchen door. Stop! Police! Nobody move! The lights suddenly came on, momentarily blinding everyone. Adesua blinked, trying to understand what was happening. Several officers entered through different doors, weapons in hand, shouting orders, and behind them, with an expression of contained triumph, was Femi Adeyemi. What the hell is this? Obina roared. This, Chief Adebayo, is the end of your reign. Femi approached with a microphone in hand. Everything you just said was recorded. Every threat, every confession, every detail about what your family did to Yejid Okoro. That's illegal. You can't record without my consent. Actually, we can. When there is suspicion of criminal activity, authorities can authorize surveillance. And thanks to certain documents we received this morning, we had more than enough suspicion. Obina turned towards Adesua with murderous fury in his eyes. You knew this was going to happen? No. Adesua shook her head, as surprised as he was. I knew nothing. She's telling the truth, Femi intervened. Adesua didn't know about the operation, but someone else did. Someone who has been waiting years to see justice. From behind the officers emerged a figure that made Adesua's heart stop. Iya Nkiru. Her grandmother walked slowly, leaning on her cane, but with her head held high and her eyes shining with a strength Adesua had never seen. Grandma, how? When you left tonight, I knew something was wrong. Iya Nkiru spoke with a clear, firm voice. I called Miss Adeyemi. She contacted the authorities, and together, We prepared this. She approached Obina, looking him directly in the eyes without an ounce of fear. For 25 years, I kept silent. For 25 years, I carried the pain of losing my daughter because of your father, but tonight I heard everything you said, and now the world will hear it too. Chief Obina Adebayo, for the first time in his life, was speechless. The officers began to handcuff him while he yelled about lawyers and lawsuits. Kunle tried to flee but was stopped before reaching the door. Adesua ran to her grandmother, hugging her tightly. "Grandma, is everything he said about my mother true? About Chief Adebayo Sr.?" Nkiru held her, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "It's true, my child. All of it is true, and the time has come for you to know the whole story." Outside, the sirens of more patrol cars lit up the night. Inside, two women embraced as decades of secrets finally came to light. The battle was not over. It had just begun. But for the first time, Adesua felt she was not alone, and that made all the difference. The central police station was an old building that smelled of cold coffee and old papers. Adesua was sitting in a waiting room with her grandmother, both wrapped in blankets and kind officer had offered them. Outside, dawn began to paint the sky with pink and orange hues, but neither of them had slept. Femi Adeyemi had spent the last few hours giving statements, handing over evidence, coordinating with the prosecutors who had arrived urgently when they learned the magnitude of the case. Obina and Kunle Adebayo were in separate cells, their lawyers already working frantically to get them out on bail, but for the moment, they were behind bars, and that was enough. "Grandma," Adesua finally broke the silence that had enveloped them for hours. "I need to know everything about my mother, about Chief Adebayo Sr., about what really happened." Nkiru closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from somewhere deep within her soul. When she opened them, there was a mixture of pain and relief Adesua had never seen. "Your mother was the light of my life, Adesua. Yeide Okoro had your same smile, your same determination, your same inner fire. When I looked at her, I saw all the good the world could offer." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "I had been working for the Adebayos for 3 years when Yejide turned 19. She needed a job, and I thought I could protect her if she worked with me. How wrong I was." Adesua took her grandmother's hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath the wrinkled skin. Adebayo Sr. noticed her from the first day. It was impossible not to notice her. Yejide had that ability to light up any room she entered. At first, Nkiru sighed deeply. Yejide believed she loved him, and perhaps, in his own twisted way, Adebayo Sr. also loved her. But the love of men like him always comes with conditions, with limits, with secrets. She paused, looking towards the window where the rising sun began to filter golden light. When Yejide discovered she was pregnant, Adebayo Sr. completely changed. The charming and attentive man became cold, calculating. He offered her money to not have the baby. Yejide refused. He offered her more money to disappear, to go far away and never contact the Adebayo family. Yejide also refused that. What did she want? She wanted Adebayo Sr. to recognize his daughter, to give you his surname, his protection, your rightful place in the world. She was naive, my Yejide. She thought love could conquer the pride and ambition of a man like him. Tears began to stream down Nkiru's cheeks. Adebayo Sr.'s wife, Ekayete, discovered the truth shortly after you were born. I don't know how she found out, but she did. And Ekayete was a strong-willed woman. She gave Adebayo Sr. an ultimatum. Either Yejide disappeared from their lives forever, or she would destroy him publicly, ruin his reputation, his business, everything he had built. And what did he do? He chose his empire over his daughter, over you. He told Yejide she had to leave, that she could never contact him again, that she could never reveal who her baby's father was. He offered her a considerable amount of money, enough to start a new life in another country. Adesua felt a lump in her throat. But you said she rejected the money. She rejected it. Yejide had pride, Adesua. Too much pride for her own good. She said she wanted nothing from a man who was capable of abandoning his own blood, that she preferred to raise her daughter in poverty rather than accept crumbs from someone without honor. Nkiru paused, her breathing becoming more difficult. A week after that conversation, Yejide disappeared. Adesua's heart stopped. Disappeared? What do you mean she disappeared? Exactly that. One night, after putting you to sleep in your cradle, she left the apartment saying she was going to buy milk. She never returned. Did you look for her? I looked for her for years, Adesua. I went to the police. I hired private investigators with the little money I had. I put up posters all over the city. No one found anything. It was as if the earth had swallowed her. Adesua felt like she couldn't breathe. Do you think Adebayo Sr. had something to do with it? Nkiru took a moment to respond. For a long time, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the man my daughter had fallen in love with was capable of something like that. But over the years, as I watched the Adebayos destroy anyone who stood in their way, I began to have doubts. Doubts that turned into suspicions. Suspicions that turned into certainty. Why did you never tell me? Because I wanted to protect you. Nkiru took Adesua's face in her hands. If you had known the truth, you would have sought out the Adebayos. You would have demanded answers, and they would have destroyed you as they destroyed everyone else. I preferred you to believe your mother died in an accident. At least that way you could have peace. Peace? Adesua stood up abruptly, frustration and pain mixing in her voice. Do you think I lived in peace believing my mother was dead? Do you think it didn't hurt every holiday without her? Every birthday? Every important moment of my life, where she should have been? I know, my child. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger, braver. I'm sorry for everything. Adesua looked at her grandmother, this woman who had sacrificed everything to raise her, who had worked until she was sick to give her a future, who had carried impossible secrets for decades. And despite the pain, despite the betrayal she felt, she couldn't hate her. She knelt before her, taking her hands again. I forgive you, Grandma, but I need to know one more thing. Do you think my mother is still alive? Nkiru looked at her with eyes full of a hope she had kept hidden for years. I don't know, Adesua, but they never found a body. There was never any proof she was dead. And there's something I never told you because I didn't want to give you false hope. What thing? 5 years ago, I received a letter. No sender, no signature. It just said, "She is well, don't look for her." It was written in French. Adesua felt a shiver run down her spine. French? Why in French? Yejide spoke French perfectly. I taught it to her when she was a child, just as I taught you. It was our secret language, the one we used when we didn't want anyone else to understand. Did you keep the letter? It's in the leather folder, with all the other documents. The door to the room opened, and Femi Adeyemi entered, looking exhausted but satisfied. Ladies, we have news. The prosecutor has decided to file formal charges against Obina and Kunle Adebayo. Extortion, threats, and we are investigating possible connections to the disappearance of Yejide Okoro. Adesua stood up immediately. They can investigate that? After so many years? There is no statute of limitations for certain crimes, Miss Okoro. And with the recorded confessions from last night, we have enough to reopen your mother's case. Nkiru let out a suppressed sob. Really? After all this time? Really, ma'am. Femi approached, placing a gentle hand on the elderly woman's shoulder. But we need your full cooperation. All the documents, all the letters, everything you have saved. I will. Nkiru nodded. Everything, every paper, every photo, every memory. If that helps find my Yejide, I will hand it over, without hesitation. Femi looked at Adesua with a serious expression. There's something else you need to know. During the interrogation, Kunle started talking. It seems he wants to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for information. What kind of information? He says he knows what really happened to Yejide Okoro. He says his grandfather, Adebayo Sr., told him the truth before he died, and that Obina also knows but has never admitted it. The world seemed to stop. Adesua felt her knees weaken. Kunle knows where my mother is. We're not sure yet. He could be lying to get a better deal, but the prosecutors are going to interrogate him further. If there's any truth to what he says, we'll find it. The following hours were a whirlwind of statements, signatures, legal procedures. Adesua barely understood. Nkiru had to be taken to the hospital for a checkup due to the stress of the night, but doctors confirmed she was stable. While waiting for news in the hospital corridor, Adesua received an unexpected call. Miss Okoro, this is Emeka Peralta. I just heard what happened last night. Are you all right? Chef Emeka. Adesua felt relief at hearing a familiar voice. Yes, I'm all right. It was a long night. They told me they used my name to set a trap for you. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. You had no way of knowing. There was a pause on the line. Miss Okoro, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. But I was afraid. What are you talking about? I knew your mother, Yejide. We worked together briefly many years ago in another restaurant before she started working for the Adebayos. Adesua almost dropped the phone. You knew my mother? Yes. She was an extraordinary woman, kind, intelligent, full of life. When I knew who you were, when I saw you for the first time at the Golden Palm, I almost couldn't believe it. You are identical to her, Miss Okoro. Identical. Why did you never tell me? because Yejide made me promise that if I ever met her daughter, I wouldn't tell her anything until the right moment. She told me that someday, when you were ready, the truth would come to light, and that when that happened, I would have to tell you something important. Adesuwa's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. What thing? Not over the phone. I need to see you in person. You can come to the restaurant tomorrow morning before it opens. There's something your mother left for you. Something I've kept for over 20 years. My mother left something for me? Yes, and I think it's the key to finding her. The call ended, leaving Adesuwa with more questions than answers. What had her mother left her? How could Emeka have kept such a secret for so long? And why had Yejide trusted him that night? As Nkiru slept in the hospital bed, connected to gently beeping monitors, Adesuwa stayed awake, looking out the window. The city sparkled with thousands of lights, each representing a life, a story, a secret. Somewhere in that world, perhaps her mother still existed. Perhaps she had spent all these years hidden, waiting for the right moment to return. Or perhaps the letter had been a cruel joke, a false hope designed to torture. It didn't matter. Adesuwa would find the truth. Whatever the cost, her phone vibrated with a message from Femi. Kunle talked. He says Yejide didn't die. He says Adebayo Senyo sent her away to Europe with a new identity. He says there's evidence in a safe deposit box that only Obina can open. Tomorrow we'll try to get a search warrant. This isn't over, Adesuwa. It's just beginning. Adesuwa read the message 3 times, letting the words penetrate her mind. Her mother was alive, or at least had been alive, when Adebayo Sr. sent her away. Europe, a new identity, a safe deposit box with evidence. And Emeka had something her mother had left for her. Something he had kept for over 2 decades, waiting for this moment. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit, but the complete picture was still blurry, incomplete, full of shadows and mysteries. Adesuwa looked at her sleeping grandmother, this woman who had sacrificed everything for her, who had carried impossible secrets to protect her. I'm going to find her, Grandma, she whispered in the darkness. I'm going to find Mum, I promise you. Outside, the night continued its course, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding beneath its blanket of stars. But inside Adesuwa, something had changed permanently. She was no longer just a waitress fighting to survive. She was a daughter looking for her mother, a granddaughter honoring her grandmother's sacrifice, a woman reclaiming her truth, and nothing and no one would stop her. Not even the ghosts of the past that still remained to be discovered, because in the Adebayo's safe deposit box awaited secrets no one had imagined. Secrets that would not only change Adesuwa's life, they would change everything she thought she knew about her family, about the Adebayos, and about the night Yejide Okoro disappeared forever. The sun was just beginning to peak when Adesuwa arrived at the Golden Palm. The restaurant looked different in the morning light, stripped of its glamour, revealing the cracks in the walls and the wear and tear of the years, as if the building itself knew it no longer had to pretend perfection. Emeka was waiting for her at the back door, the same place where days ago her nightmare had begun. But this time, the chef had a different expression. It wasn't worry or fear, it was something Adesuwa couldn't fully identify. Nostalgia, anticipation, guilt. Thank you for coming, Miss Okoro. His voice was softer than usual. I know that after everything that happened here, this place must bring back bad memories for you. Memories don't scare me, chef. What scares me is not knowing the truth. Emeka nodded slowly and led her inside. They walked through the empty kitchen to a small room in the back that Adesuwa had never noticed. It was barely a storage closet filled with dusty boxes and old utensils. I worked here for 32 years, Emeka spoke as he moved boxes. Long before the Adebayos bought this place, long before you were born. He stopped in front of a rusty metal box, hidden behind sacks of flour. When I met your mother, I was barely a kitchen assistant. Yejide sometimes came with Nkiru while she did translations for a businessman who dined here regularly. Your mother was extraordinary. She had that light some people possess, that ability to make everyone around her feel special. Were you close? We were friends, good friends. Yejide had no one else but Nkiru. And I was alone in the world too. We understood each other. Emeka opened the metal box with a small key he wore around his neck. Inside was a package wrapped in yellowed cloth, aged by time. The night before Yejide disappeared, she came to see me. She was scared, but also determined. She told me she had to leave, that she couldn't explain why, but that she needed to ask me a favor. Emeka's hands trembled as he unwrapped the package. She gave me this, made me swear I would keep it until her daughter was ready to receive it. She told me, when Adesuwa is strong, When the world can no longer ignore her, then she will know it is time. Inside the package were 3 objects: a letter sealed with red wax, a small photograph, and a passport. Adesua took the photograph first. In it appeared Yejide, clearly pregnant, smiling at the camera with one hand on her belly. Behind the photo, in elegant handwriting, was written, "For my Adesua, the day I knew you would be my greatest gift." Tears began to fall before Adesua could stop them. The passport, Emeka pointed to the document. "Look at it." Adesua opened it with trembling hands. It was a French passport, and the name that appeared was not Yejide Okoro, it was Marie Logan. "Your mother had a false identity," Emeka explained. "She had obtained it months before she disappeared. I think she was planning to flee, to start a new life away from the Adebayos. But then, if everything was prepared, why didn't she take me with her? That, Miss Okoro, I believe the letter explains." Adesua looked at the sealed envelope. Her hands trembled so much she could barely hold it. Her whole life, all the unanswered questions, all the emptiness in her heart, perhaps the answers were there on that yellowed paper, waiting to be read. She broke the seal carefully, as if the envelope could disintegrate at any moment. Inside were several sheets written in her mother's handwriting, the same handwriting she had seen in the letter Ian Kiru kept, Yejide's handwriting. Adesua began to read aloud, needing to hear her mother's words filling the silence. "My dearest Adesua, if you are reading this, it means the time has come. It means you are strong, that you are brave, that you are everything I always knew you would be. There are so many things I wish I could have told you in person. So many hugs I wish I could have given you. So many nights I wish I could have been there to comfort you when you cried. But life forced me to choose, and I chose your safety over my happiness. Chief Adebayo Sr. is your father. I don't know if you already know it when you read this, but I need you to understand it from my perspective. I loved him, Adesua. I loved him with all my naive heart, and he, in his own twisted way, also loved me. But the love of men like him always has limits, and those limits are power and money. When I became pregnant, Adebayo Sr. offered me money to disappear. I refused. I wanted him to recognize you, to give you your place. I was foolish to think his love was stronger than his ambition. Then his wife, Ekete, discovered everything, and she was not like Adebayo Sr. She was dangerous. She threatened me directly. She told me that if I did not disappear, she would ensure that something bad happened to you, to my baby, to my Adesua. I could not risk it. I could not put you in danger. So I made a deal. I would leave, disappear forever. In return, Ekete promised that they would never touch you, that they would let you live in peace with your grandmother. Adebayo Sr. accepted the deal, but with one condition. I could not take you with me. He said you were his blood, that he would not allow his daughter to grow up in poverty in some foreign country. It was the hardest decision of my life, Adesua. Leaving you was like tearing my heart from my chest, but I did it because I loved you more than my own life. I left you with Iankiru because I knew she would raise you with love, with values, with the strength I could not give you directly. I went to France, took on a new identity, built a new life, but never, not a single day, did I stop thinking about you. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped dreaming of the moment I could see you again. Years ago, when I learned Adebayo Sr. had died, I thought of returning. But Obina already controlled everything, and he was worse than his father, crueler, more ruthless. I was afraid of what he might do to you if I appeared. So I waited. I waited for you to be strong enough to face them. I waited for the world to see who you really are. And if you are reading this, it means that moment has arrived. Adesua, my love, my life, my reason for existing. I am alive. I have been alive all these years waiting for you. And if you want to find me, if you want to know me, if you can forgive me for leaving you, there is a place in Paris, a small café in Montmartre called Le Refuge des Hommes. I go there every Sunday morning for 20 years. I always order the same thing, coffee with milk and a croissant. I always sit at the same table by the window, and I always look towards the door, waiting for the day my daughter walks through it. I love you, Adesua. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. I will love you until my last breath. Your mother, Yejide. Adesua finished reading, and the silence that followed was absolute. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably, falling onto the paper, mixing with words that had waited more than 2 decades to be read. Emeka cried too, unashamedly, not trying to hide it. She's alive, Adesua whispered. My mother is alive. She always was, Miss Okoro, waiting for you, loving you from afar. Adesua hugged the letter to her chest, feeling as if her mother's arms enveloped her across time and distance. At that moment, her phone rang. It was Femi. "Adesua, we have the search warrant." They opened the Adebayo's safe deposit box, and we found something you need to see urgently. Something about your mother. Something Obinna hid for years. Adesua looked at Emeka, then at the letter, then at the passport with the name Marie Logan. "I'm coming." Because her mother's letter had answered many questions, but what awaited in that safe deposit box would reveal that Yejide Okoro's story was much more complex than anyone had imagined, and that Adesua's journey was just beginning. The Adebayo's safe deposit box contained decades of secrets, bribery documents, illegal contracts, evidence of shady dealings that would shake any business empire. But none of that mattered to Adesua at that moment. What mattered was a manila envelope with her name written in handwriting she would now recognize anywhere. Her mother's handwriting. Femi handed it to her with careful hands. Obinna hid it here years ago. Apparently, Yejide sent this letter to Adebayo Sr. shortly before he died, asking him to deliver it to her daughter. He never did, and Obinna decided to bury it along with all his family's other secrets. Adesua opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet and a recent photograph. The image showed a woman with gray hair, bright eyes, and a smile that was exactly like hers. Yejide, her mother, alive, real, waiting for her. The letter was brief. "My Adesua, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I never stopped fighting for you. Every year on your birthday, I sent letters to your father asking him to give them to you. He never did, but I'm still waiting. I'll always wait. Le refuge des âmes every Sunday until my heart stops beating. I love you, Mum." Adesua looked at Femi, then at Emeka, who had come with her, and finally made a decision that would change her life forever. "I need to go to Paris." The flight lasted hours that felt like eternities. Nkiru could not travel due to her health condition, but insisted that Adesua go. "Go, my child," she had told her in the hospital, holding her hands tightly. "Go find my Yejide. Tell her I forgive her. Tell her I never stopped loving her, and bring her back home." Femi took care of everything. The tickets, the hotel. It was Sunday when Adesua arrived in Montmartre. The cobblestone streets gleamed under a spring sun. Artists painted on the corners. Musicians played melodies that floated in the air like promises. And there, on a narrow street, was the café her mother had mentioned. Le refuge des âmes, the refuge of souls. Adesua stopped in front of the door, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone around her could hear it. What if her mother wasn't there? What if she had stopped going? What if after so many years she no longer wanted to be found? But then she remembered Nkiru's words. "Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it." She pushed the door and entered. The café was small, cozy, with walls covered with old photographs, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling every corner. There were few people at that early hour. A young couple in a corner, an old man reading the newspaper, and by the window, at a table for two, a silver-haired woman looked out at the street with the expression of someone who has waited a lifetime. Adesua couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but look at that woman who was her mother, who had sacrificed everything to protect her, who had spent more than 2 decades waiting for this moment. Then Yejide turned her head. Their eyes met, and the world stopped. Yejide put a hand to her chest as if her heart threatened to burst out. Her lips trembled, forming a word that she couldn't quite pronounce. Tears began to roll down her cheeks as she slowly stood up, without taking her eyes off Adesua. "Adesua!" Her voice was barely a whisper. "My Adesua!" "Mum!" That single word broke the dam that held back decades of pain, of absence, of unexpressed love. Yejide ran to her daughter and enveloped her in an embrace that seemed to want to recover all the lost hugs, all the goodnight kisses, all the tears she couldn't wipe away. "My baby," Yejide sobbed. "My beautiful baby, you finally came. You came." Adesua cried too, clinging to her mother as if afraid she would disappear again. "I found you, Mum. I found you." They remained embraced for minutes that felt like hours, while the other customers in the cafe watched, moved, not fully understanding what they were witnessing, but feeling the magnitude of the moment. When they finally separated, Yejide took Adesua's face in her hands, studying every detail, as if wanting to memorize every line, every expression. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "More beautiful than I ever imagined. And those eyes. You have my eyes. And your smile according to your grandmother. Nkiru, how is my mother? She's waiting for you. She's ill, but she's fighting. She wants to see you, Mum. She wants you to come home." Yejide closed her eyes, fresh tears escaping. "Can she forgive me?" After I abandoned her, she forgave you a long time ago. She just wants to hug you one more time." They sat together at the table by the window, the same table where Yejide had waited for 20 years. And they talked. They talked for hours, sharing stories, filling gaps, building bridges over the abyss of time that had separated them. Yejide told about her life in Paris, how she had worked as a translator using the languages Nkiru had taught her, how she had built a small but dignified life, how every Sunday she came to this cafe hoping to see her daughter walk through that door. Adesua told about her life, about Nkiru raising her with unwavering love, about learning 7 languages, listening to her grandmother, about working as a waitress, being humiliated, and finally finding her voice. "You answered in French." Yejide laughed through tears when Adesua told the story. "Of course you did. You are my daughter and Nkiru's granddaughter, the 2 strongest women I know." As the sun began to set over Paris, painting the sky with golden and pink hues, Yejide took Adesua's hands. "And now what? Now you come home with me. Grandma needs you. I need you. There's no one to hide from anymore, Mum. The Adebayos are finished. Obina and Kunle will face justice for everything they did. And you deserve to get your life back." Yejide looked out the window at the city streets that had been her refuge for so long. "I spent over 20 years running, Adesua, hiding, living half a life, because the other half of my heart was with you. Can I really come back? Can I really start over?" "Not start over, Mum. Continue. Continue from where we were unfairly separated. Continue being a family." Weeks later, at the city's airport, Nkiru waited in a wheelchair, surrounded by Femi, Emeka, and the medical team who had insisted on accompanying her. When the international arrivals gates opened and Adesua appeared, holding the arm of a silver-haired woman, the cry that escaped Nkiru was purely animal, the sound of a mother finding her lost daughter. Yejide ran towards her, kneeling in front of the wheelchair, taking her mother's hands. "Mum, forgive me. Forgive me for leaving you. Forgive me for everything." Nkiru hugged her with the little strength she had left, but with all the love she had stored for decades. "There's nothing to forgive, my child. You're here, you're alive. That's all that matters." Adesua watched the scene with tears rolling down her cheeks. 3 generations of Okoro women finally reunited. 3 women who had survived impossible losses, terrible injustices, and cruel separations, but who had never, ever stopped loving each other. Femi published her report weeks later. The story of the Adebayos and their fall was national news for months. Obina and Kunle were convicted of multiple charges, losing not only their freedom, but the entire empire they had built on lies and cruelty. Harmony General Hospital was saved, thanks to a coalition of ethical investors Femi helped gather. Nkiru was able to continue her treatment without worries, now surrounded by her daughter and granddaughter. Adesua received job offers from international translation agencies, prestigious universities, and humanitarian organizations that wanted to leverage her gift for languages. But she chose something different. She founded a free language school for underprivileged youths, teaching in the same way Nkiru had taught her, with patience, with love, with the certainty that knowledge is the most powerful weapon against injustice. She named it the Yejide Nkiru Language Academy. One spring afternoon, Adesua was sitting in the garden of her new home, watching her mother and grandmother converse under the shade of a tree. Nkiru laughed at something. Yejide said, a sound Adesua thought she would never hear. Yejide noticed her gaze and smiled, extending a hand to her. "Come here, my child. Sit with us." Adesua joined them, sitting on the grass between the 2 women she loved most in the world. "Do you know what I learned from all this?" she said softly. "What, my love?" Nkiru asked. "That the most important language is not French, nor Yoruba, nor any of the 7 I speak. The most important language is love, and that I learned from you." Yejide and Nkiru exchanged a look, their eyes shining with tears of happiness. "And you speak it perfectly, my child." Yejide kissed her forehead. "You speak it perfectly." The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky with the same golden and pink hues Adesua had seen in Paris the day she found her mother. But now those colors had a different meaning. They were no longer the end of a day, they were the beginning of a new life. A life where 3 women the world had tried to separate were finally together. A life where truth had triumphed over lies. A life where love had conquered power. And that life, Adesua knew with absolute certainty, was the best ending she could ever have imagined. Because it wasn't really an ending. It was the beginning of everything that always should have been.